Of course she's the one who needs help with the coffee maker. Some people just aren't cut out for this level of service. The words dripping with a syrupy, false sweetness were meant to be an insult whispered just loud enough to be heard. The woman who said them had no idea she wasn't talking about a clumsy new hire. She was talking about her new boss, the woman who owned the entire airline. She thought she was putting a trainee in her place, but she was actually punching her own ticket to unemployment. In exactly 24 hours, this entire crew would be disbanded, their careers in aviation permanently grounded. This isn't just a story about a takedown. It's about unexpected consequences when people with power abuse those without it, proving that in the real world, firing someone is only the beginning of the battle. The recycled air of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner en route from JFK to Heathrow was already thick with the scent of jet fuel and simmering resentment. For Amara Reynolds, flying was second nature. She'd grown up in the first-class cabins of Skyline Airways, the company her father James Reynolds had built from a single leased plane into a global empire. But today, she wasn't Amara Reynolds, heir to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. She was Alicia Torres, a new hire flight attendant with slightly too eager eyes and a uniform that felt both foreign and uncomfortably snug. Her undercover mission had been born of necessity. For months, the numbers on the transatlantic routes weren't just soft, they were bleeding. Customer complaints were spiking, citing everything from rude service to missing amenities. Yet, internal reports from the crews on these routes, particularly Flight SL-107, were consistently glowing. The dissonance was too great to ignore. James wanted to send in a team of corporate auditors, but Amara had argued for a more subtle approach. "You send in suits, they'll just put on a show," she'd told him in his corner office overlooking Manhattan. "Let me see what it's really like. Let me see what they do when they think no one important is watching." At 32, Amara Reynolds was already a force to reckon with. Harvard MBA Executive VP of Operations and widely regarded as the heir apparent to Skyline. But there was more at stake than just fixing customer service issues. Rumors were circulating that certain board members were pushing for her father to step down, claiming at 65 he'd lost his edge. There were whispers of a potential hostile takeover if the declining numbers continued. This mission wasn't just about catching corrupt employees. It was about protecting her family's legacy. Amara had another reason for going undercover, one that burned deeper than corporate metrics. When she was 15, she'd been removed from first class on a competitor's airline despite having a valid ticket. The memory still burned vividly in her mind. She had boarded early, excited to be flying alone for the first time. Her father had business in Chicago and had arranged for her to join him for the weekend. Wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, comfortable clothes for the flight, she settled into 2A by the window. "Excuse me." A flight attendant with pinched lips and cold eyes had approached. "This section is for first-class passengers only." I know teenage Amara had responded, offering her boarding pass. "That's my seat." The woman had barely glanced at the ticket. "There must be a mistake. Where are your parents?" "My dad's already in Chicago. I'm flying to meet him." The flight attendant's voice had lowered to a whisper. "Look, honey, these seats cost thousands of dollars. I think you're confused." Despite Amara's protests and the clearly printed seat assignment, the woman had called over the purser. "We have a situation." By then, other first-class passengers were watching, most silent, a few nodding in agreement with the crew's assessment. "If you don't move to your actual seat, we'll have to get security involved." The purser had warned, as though Amara were attempting some elaborate scam rather than simply sitting in her assigned seat. The humiliation had been overwhelming. Tears burning behind her eyes, Amara had gathered her things to move when a commotion at the front of the cabin caught everyone's attention. What the hell is going on here? James Reynolds had boarded, having changed his plans at the last minute to fly with his daughter. His imposing figure and thunderous expression had immediately changed the atmosphere. The subsequent apologies had been profuse, but hollow. The damage was done. Amara had seen firsthand how people could be judged, dismissed, and humiliated based on appearance alone, even when they had every right to be where they were. I'll never forget that feeling she had told her father when proposing the undercover operation. Being treated like you don't belong, like you're somehow less than human. Nobody deserves that. Especially not on our airline. The board won't like it, he'd warned. The board doesn't need to know, she'd replied. Just give me a chance to find out what's really happening. Creating Alicia Torres took meticulous planning. Amara's naturally curly hair was straightened and dyed with temporary color to add caramel highlights. Her designer glasses were swapped for contacts, and her posture was intentionally less confident, more deferential. She was just another face, another body to hustle down the aisle. For 8 weeks, she trained alongside actual new hires at Skyline's facility in Dallas. She learned emergency procedures, service protocols, and airline operations from the ground up. While the other trainees went home to apartments and family, Amara stayed in a modest extended-stay hotel, living on a flight attendant's salary, completely immersed in her role. Her background story was carefully constructed. Alicia Torres, 28, born to a Puerto Rican mother and African-American father. Community college education, previously worked in hotel hospitality, looking for a career with travel opportunities. The HR files were created with just enough authenticity to withstand casual scrutiny, but flagged at the highest levels to prevent accidental discovery. Only 3 people knew her true identity: her father, Victor Ramirez, Skyline's chief of security, and her executive assistant, who maintained her official schedule while she was on sabbatical to work on special projects. While the cover story was being established, Amara threw herself into advanced training beyond what regular attendants received. She insisted on comprehensive medical emergency training, learning to handle everything from heart attacks to childbirth. She studied the aircraft systems, memorized safety protocols, and mastered the service standards that Skyline was known for. "You're overthinking this," Victor had told her during a late-night prep session. "You're just there to observe and document. You don't need to be a perfect flight attendant." "If I'm not convincing, the whole operation fails," Amara had replied, practicing the proper technique for pouring champagne without splashing. "Besides, you know me. I don't do anything halfway." The night before her first flight, Amara stood in front of her hotel room mirror, adjusting her Skyline Airways uniform. The navy blue blazer with silver trim, the crisp white shirt, the silk scarf tied perfectly at her neck, it was strange seeing herself this way. She'd flown millions of miles as a passenger, but had never truly understood what life was like on the other side of the service equation. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. 48 hours until you board as crew, not executive. Be careful. Trust your instincts. She texted back a simple, "I will. Trust me." As she laid out her credentials for the morning, her new ID badge reading Alicia Torres, crew papers and security clearance, Amara felt a flutter of nerves. Tomorrow she would step into a world where her name carried no weight, where she would be at the bottom of the hierarchy, invisible and expendable to those who usually fawned over her. It was exactly what she needed to see the truth. The crew lounge at JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with activity as Amara entered, rolling her regulation suitcase behind her. Flight attendants in various states of readiness clustered around tables, some finishing meals, others reviewing flight manifests, a few simply staring into space with the 1,000-yard gaze of the chronically jet-lagged. Torres Alicia. Torres. A sharp voice cut through the ambient chatter. Amara turned to see a woman approaching. She recognized her immediately from the personnel files she'd reviewed. Veronica Bailey, 45, lead flight attendant for SL-107. Platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, immaculate makeup, and a name badge polished to a gleam. She wore her uniform like armor, every crease perfect, every button fastened precisely. "Yes, that's me," Amara replied deliberately, allowing a note of nervousness into her voice. Veronica's eyes swept over her, a swift assessment that felt like a physical touch. "You're late. Pre-flight briefing started 3 minutes ago." I'm sorry, the security line was, save it. Veronica cut her off. Rule number 1, excuses don't fly. Rule number 2, I don't tolerate lateness. Consider this your only warning. She turned on her heel, clearly expecting Amara to follow, which she did, careful to maintain the slightly hurried, apologetic demeanor of a new hire on thin ice. The briefing room was small, populated by the remaining crew for SL 107. Veronica took position at the front, her authority absolute. Everyone, this is Alicia Torres, our new addition, fresh out of training. The way she said it made training sound like kindergarten. She'll be shadowing an economy today. Michael, she's your responsibility. Michael Dawson, 50, looked up from his phone with obvious annoyance. Tall, thin, with thinning brown hair and a perpetual look of boredom, he gave Amara a cursory nod. Great. Another trainee. His tone suggested this was anything but great. Amara noticed a young woman in the corner, Hispanic, barely out of her 20s, who kept her eyes downcast when Veronica spoke. The name badge read, Diana Lopez. She looked up briefly, offering Amara a small, sympathetic smile before returning her attention to the manifest in her lap. Now, for today's VIP list, Veronica continued. We have 3 gold members in, first 2 Skyline members in business, and she paused, her expression souring, a handful of upgraded loyalty members scattered throughout. Upgrades again? Michael sighed theatrically. Why does corporate keep doing this? These people have no idea how to behave in premium cabins. Amara noted the comment with interest. Skyline's loyalty program was designed specifically to reward frequent flyers with occasional upgrades. It was a cornerstone of their customer retention strategy, but from Michael's tone, you'd think they were letting livestock into the dining room. We'll manage, Veronica said crisply. As always. Now for service flow, I want pre-departure beverages completed within 15 minutes of boarding. Michael will handle first with me. Diana and Alicia, you're in economy. I want drink service starting exactly 22 minutes after takeoff, meal service to follow 45 minutes after that. The briefing continued, a mixture of standard procedures and subtle deviations that only someone intimately familiar with Skyline's protocols would notice. Amara listened intently, mentally cataloging each variance. The clock was ticking 10 hours in the air with this crew starting now. As they filed out to begin boarding preparations, Diana fell into step beside her. Don't worry about being late, she said quietly. Veronica says that to all the new people. It's her way of establishing dominance. Thanks, Amara replied. Is she always so intense? Yes, but it could be worse. Just stay out of her way. Do exactly as she says, and you'll survive. Diana's voice carried the weary acceptance of someone who had learned this lesson the hard way. I'm on my 2nd year. It gets easier. But the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched her crew documents suggested otherwise. As they boarded the aircraft to prepare the cabin, Amara caught sight of Veronica and Michael huddled near the galley heads, close together, voices too low to hear. They separated quickly when they noticed her Veronica's smile as artificial as the flowers in the first-class lavatories. Alicia, be a dear, and check the emergency equipment in the aft section, she called out, voice dripping with false sweetness. Amara nodded and moved toward the back of the plane, but not before catching Michael's muttered comment. Hope this one lasts longer than the last 3. The implication sent a chill down her spine. What had happened to the last 3 new hires? And what exactly had she stepped into? The boarding process was controlled chaos, a delicate dance of luggage seat assignments and human emotion. Amara stood at the aft entry door, greeting passengers with a practiced smile, directing them to their seats and assisting with carry-on items. From her position, she could observe the entire operation. Veronica and Michael worked the forward cabin like seasoned performers, all smiles and solicitous attention for the premium passengers. Diana moved efficiently through the main cabin, helping families settle resolving seating disputes with quiet authority. "Excuse me," a harried businessman interrupted her observations. "I was supposed to be in an aisle seat. This is a middle." He thrust his boarding pass at her with barely concealed irritation. "Let me check that for you, sir," Amara said, examining his ticket. She noted that he was right. His reservation clearly showed seat 32C in aisle, but he had been directed to 32B. She was about to assist when Michael appeared at her side, smoothly taking the boarding pass from her hand. "I'll handle this," he said, his tone professional but with an undercurrent of condescension. "Sir, if you'll follow me." Amara watched as Michael led the man not to his assigned aisle seat, but to a different one several rows back. The original aisle seat, she noticed, remained empty until a well-dressed woman boarded 10 minutes later. Michael personally escorted her to it with an obsequious flourish. Interesting, Amara thought. Seat assignments being manipulated. But why the cabin secured for takeoff? Amara took her jump seat next to Diana. The engines rumbled to life and the massive aircraft began its taxi toward the runway. So Diana whispered, barely audible over the engine noise, "What made you want to join Skyline?" Amara gave her practiced response. "I was working hotels, but the schedule was killing me. Thought flying might give me more flexibility, maybe see some of the world." Diana nodded. "That's what I thought too." There was a wistfulness in her voice that suggested the reality had fallen short of the dream. The aircraft accelerated down the runway, the familiar pressure pushing Amara back into her seat. As they climbed to cruising altitude, she observed Veronica through the cabin divider, already preparing the premium beverage service with an efficiency that was genuinely impressive. Whatever else she might be, Veronica Bailey was extremely good at her job. Once the seatbelt sign dinged off, the real work began. Amara followed Diana to the galley to prepare the drink carts. This was where her training was put to the test. The coffee maker, an industrial model specific to this aircraft, was indeed complicated with multiple settings, pressure gauges, and a temperamental water system. As Amara studied the controls, Veronica appeared behind her. "Of course she's the one who needs help with the coffee maker. Some people just aren't cut out for this level of service." Her voice carried just enough for nearby crew to hear a perfect blend of amusement and disdain. Michael snickered dutifully. "Want me to show her, or should we just serve instant to economy?" "I've got it," Amara said, keeping her voice level. She deliberately fumbled for another moment before operating the machine correctly. To show immediate mastery would raise suspicions. "Wonders never cease," Veronica said dryly. "When you're done playing barista, I need you to do a complete inventory of the rear galley. Every mixer, every napkin, every ice cube. I want to know exactly what we have." It was a tedious assignment typically given to the most junior crew as busy work, but it would also give Amara the perfect opportunity to document the actual inventory, information that would prove crucial later. As she meticulously counted stock, she overheard Veronica in the mid-galley speaking to Michael in low tones. "The manifest says we have 85 chicken entrees and 78 pasta. Make sure the count shows 65 and 60. "Already adjusted," Michael replied. "What about the premium liquor standard procedure? Mark half the Grey Goose as depleted prior to departure." Amara kept her head down, but her mind was racing. They were creating artificial shortages in the inventory before the flight even reached cruising altitude. But to what end? She was about to find out. The meal service began exactly 45 minutes after takeoff, as Veronica had dictated. Amara was assigned to push the cart alongside Diana, learning the rhythm of service down the narrow aisle. Chicken or pasta? Diana asked each passenger, her voice maintaining a pleasant tone despite the repetition. Amara watched carefully, noting that the procedure was standard until they reached row 38. A passenger in a business suit requested the chicken entree. "I'm so sorry, sir," Diana said, her eyes flicking briefly toward the galley where Veronica stood watching. "The chicken has been very popular today. We only have pasta left." The man sighed but accepted the pasta without complaint. A few rows later, another passenger in casual clothing also requested chicken. Once again, he was told it was unavailable. But then something unusual happened. When they reached row 42, a well-dressed woman with an expensive watch asked for chicken. Diana hesitated, then leaned in and said quietly, "We actually might have a chicken meal from business class. They're premium quality, but there's a $25 surcharge. Would you be interested?" The woman barely hesitated. "Yes, that's fine." Diana produced a chicken entree, identical to the ones they'd been claiming were depleted, from a lower compartment in the cart. The woman handed over her credit card, but Diana shook her head. "I'm sorry, our card machine is having connectivity issues at this altitude. Cash would be much easier if you have it." The passenger reached into her purse and handed over 3 $10 bills. Diana quickly pocketed the cash and gave the woman her meal. Amara kept her expression neutral, but inside she was stunned by the brazenness of the scheme. They were creating artificial scarcity, then charging passengers extra for standard meals, collecting cash that would never appear in any Skyline accounting system. As they continued down the aisle, Amara noticed Diana was selective about who received the special offer. Business travelers who looked like they were on expense accounts were targeted. Families with children were not. And she couldn't help but notice that passengers of color were almost never offered the option regardless of their dress or demeanor. When they returned to the galley after completing the service, Amara discreetly observed as Diana handed a wad of cash to Veronica, who counted it quickly before stashing it in a hidden pocket inside her uniform jacket. "How did Torres do?" Veronica asked. "Fine," Diana replied, not meeting Amara's eyes. "She's catching on." Veronica turned to Amara. "First meal service is always the hardest. You'll get used to our procedures." The way she emphasized procedures made it clear that what Amara had witnessed was standard practice on these flights. The question was, how deep did the corruption go? Later, during a quiet moment while passengers were eating, Amara managed a private conversation with Diana near the rear lavatory. "That was interesting," Amara said carefully. "I've never seen that approach to meal service before." Diana glanced around nervously. "It's just how we do things on international flights. Veronica calls it service optimization. And the money goes where exactly." Diana's face tightened. "Look, if you want to survive on this crew, don't ask those kinds of questions. Just do your job, keep your head down, and follow the program." "Has anyone ever reported it?" Amara pressed, keeping her voice low. A bitter laugh escaped Diana. "Yeah. Andrea Mitchell. She was a new hire like you, full of principles. She filed a formal complaint about inventory discrepancies. Within a month, she was terminated for mishandling cash on a flight to Paris." Diana's eyes hardened. Funny thing is, she wasn't even scheduled on that flight. Somehow her employee ID got linked to a cash shortage anyway. "That sounds convenient," Amara said. "Like I said, keep your head down." Diana straightened her uniform as a call button chimed. "Veronica has been flying this route for 15 years. She has friends in scheduling friends and management friends everywhere that matters. The last person who crossed her didn't just lose their job. They lost their career." As Diana moved to answer the call, Amara felt a cold certainty settle over her. This wasn't just petty theft or bending the rules. This was an organized racket operating at 35,000 feet 1 that had been running for years with apparent impunity. And from the sounds of it, anyone who tried to expose it paid a severe price. The more disturbing realization was that this couldn't be happening without some level of protection from above. Someone in Skyline's management had to be turning a blind eye, or worse, actively participating in the cover-up. Amara reached into her pocket, feeling the reassuring shape of her phone. The voice memo app had been recording the entire meal service. Evidence was accumulating, but she needed more. Much more. As the flight progressed into its 4th hour, most passengers settled into the rhythm of long-haul travel. Movies played on seatback screens, blankets were unfurled, and the cabin lights dimmed to a soft blue glow. It was during this quieter period that Amara began to notice another pattern of behavior. Michael made regular rounds through the premium cabins, ostensibly checking on passenger comfort. But she observed that when passengers dozed off, he would surreptitiously collect items. Unopened amenity kits, barely used noise-canceling headphones, even blankets still in their plastic wrapping. Rather than returning these items to the standard collection bins, he was placing them in a separate duffel bag stashed in a crew locker near the forward galley. Amara waited for an opportunity when both Veronica and Michael were occupied with a demanding passenger in first class. She approached the locker pretending to retrieve a personal item from her own bag. With a quick glance to ensure no one was watching, she unzipped the duffel slightly. Inside were dozens of Skyline's premium amenities, designer toiletry kits, sealed headphones, plush sleep masks, and even several bottles of the expensive French moisturizer that was exclusively provided to first-class passengers. Taking a calculated risk, she quickly snapped several photos with her phone before re-zipping the bag and closing the locker. Later, as she assisted with the second beverage service, Amara deliberately positioned herself near Michael. "Need any help collecting headphones before landing?" she offered. "I noticed you've been gathering them throughout the flight." Michael regarded her with suspicion before his expression shifted to one of casual dismissal. "No need," he said. "I have a special process for the premium items. Quality control, you understand. Some of these items get really gross when used. We send them for special cleaning." It was a lie so transparent it was almost insulting. Amara knew the standard procedure was for all items to be collected, accounted for, and either disposed of or sent to specific vendors for sanitizing and repackaging. "Oh, I see," she said, feigning naive interest. "That's different from what they taught us in training." Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. "Training is one thing. Real-world operations are another. You'll learn the difference quickly enough." During her break, Amara locked herself in the rear lavatory and used the aircraft's Wi-Fi to conduct a quick search. Within minutes, she found what she was looking for: multiple eBay and Mercari listings for new open-box Skyline Airways premium amenities. The seller, Sky High Finds, was based in Queens, New York, just minutes from JFK. The listings showed dozens of items identical to those in Michael's duffel bag, priced at significant markups. A pair of noise-canceling headphones that cost Skyline $35 wholesale was selling for $129. The French moisturizer, $8 per travel-sized bottle for the Airline, was listed at $45. Amara took screenshots of everything documenting what appeared to be a thriving black market in stolen airline amenities. But the most damning evidence came unexpectedly. As passengers began to prepare for the meal service before landing, Amara noticed a man in seat 34B behaving oddly. He made repeated eye contact with Michael, who acknowledged him with an almost imperceptible nod. During a moment of turbulence when most of the crew was seated, Michael quickly slipped the man a small package. The man immediately stowed it in his carry-on bag. Amara managed to get a clear look at the passenger's boarding pass during landing preparation. Jordan Williams, a frequent flyer on the JFK London route according to his profile. He had the look of someone who traveled constantly for work. Rumpled suit, perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, the 1,000-yard stare of the chronically jet-lagged. When she mentioned collecting his headphones before landing, he responded with a knowing smile. "Michael already took care of me. We have an understanding." It clicked into place. Williams wasn't just a passenger. He was the courier, the middleman who transported the stolen goods off the plane without raising suspicion. A frequent business traveler would never be flagged by customs or security, especially one who had status with the airline. The operation was more sophisticated than she had initially thought. This wasn't opportunistic theft. It was an organized smuggling operation running right under Skyline's nose. Amara's suspicions were further confirmed when she overheard Veronica speaking to Williams as he deplaned. "Same time next week?" she asked quietly. "As always," he replied. "The cashmere throws are selling especially well. Get more if you can. As the evidence mounted, Amara realized she was uncovering something far larger than petty theft. Based on the volume of items she'd seen and the frequency of flights, this operation could be stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars in merchandise annually. And that was just one crew on one route. The question that burned in her mind was how far up the chain of command the knowledge, or complicity, extended. Were these crews simply exploiting a gap in oversight, or was there active participation from management? She needed to find out, and Diana Lopez might be her best chance at getting answers. By the 6th hour of the flight, the cabin had settled into the quiet lull that characterizes overnight transatlantic journeys. Most passengers were asleep, and the crew had retreated to the galleys for their own breaks. Amara found Diana in the mid-galley feet, propped up on a jump seat, staring vacantly at her phone. The younger woman looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from more than just physical exertion. "Mind if I join you?" Amara asked. Diana shrugged, shifting to make room. "Free country? Or free airplane, I guess?" Amara sat beside her, offering a packet of cookies she'd stashed earlier. Diana accepted with a small smile of gratitude. "Can I ask you something?" Amara ventured after a comfortable silence. "How does someone like Veronica get away with all this for so long?" Diana glanced toward the forward cabin, ensuring they were truly alone. "You really want to know?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I do. I'm trying to understand how things work around here." Diana studied her for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "It's not just Veronica," she finally said. "It's an entire network. Her husband plays golf with Thomas Bennett, the regional director for East Coast operations. They were college roommates or something. Any complaint that goes up the chain gets buried before it reaches anyone who might actually care." Amara kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened at the mention of Thomas Bennett, a board member who had been particularly vocal about her father stepping down. "So the company has no idea?" Diana gave a bitter laugh. "Oh, people know. But proving it is another matter. Veronica's smart. She makes sure the inventory numbers always balance on paper. Spillage breakage, customer satisfaction adjustments. There are a dozen categories where losses can be hidden. How many flights are running these adjustments? From what I've heard, at least 8 international routes, maybe more. It started small about 7 years ago. Just skimming a few premium liquor bottles, charging for headphones that should be free. But it grew. Now it's a whole operation. 7 years. Almost the exact time frame that Thomas Bennett had been on the board. Amara filed that information away carefully. "It seems risky," Amara observed. "All it would take is one passenger to complain to the right person." "That's the genius part," Diana said, lowering her voice further. "They're selective about who they target. Business travelers on expense accounts don't care about paying an extra $25 for a meal or $30 for premium alcohol. They just expense it. And the people who might complain, families, budget travelers, they leave alone." The conversation paused as Michael entered the galley. He gave them a suspicious look before grabbing a bottle of water and returning to the front. Once he was gone, Amara decided to take a calculated risk. "I've been thinking," she said casually. "The system you guys have going seems pretty clever. I could use some extra cash. My mom's medical bills are piling up." It was a fabricated detail from her cover story, one designed to create sympathy and a plausible motive for wanting in on the scheme. Diana's eyes widened slightly, but before she could respond, Veronica appeared at the galley entrance. "Torres Diana. Break's over. I need you to prep for breakfast service." As they moved to comply, Amara could feel Veronica's eyes on her, assessing, calculating. The lead attendant's gaze was cold, analytical, sizing up whether Amara was a threat or a potential recruit. The gambit paid off later when Michael cornered her in the aft galley while she was restocking coffee cups. Heard you were asking about our supplemental income programs, he said, his voice low. Amara glanced around, adopting an expression of nervous eagerness. Just curious. This job doesn't exactly pay the bills. You know Michael studied her for a long moment. It's not for everyone. You need to be smart, discreet, and most importantly, loyal. Veronica runs a tight operation. One slip-up affects everyone. I can be discreet, Amara assured him. I just want to learn the system. Something in Michael relaxed slightly. The prospect of a new accomplice rather than a potential whistleblower seemed to put him at ease. It's pretty simple once you know the tricks. He began, his voice taking on a proud, instructive tone. The key is knowing which passengers to approach. Business travelers are best, especially men traveling alone. They're on expenses, so they don't care about a few extra charges. As he spoke, Amara kept her face attentive, masking her disgust at the casual way he described their systematic theft. We've got it down to a science, Michael continued, warming to his subject. Liquor inventory is the easiest. Airlines expect a certain amount of spillage and comps. Amenities are trickier, but that's where Jordan comes in. He takes a bag off. Every third flight keeps a percentage of the sales. And the cash from meals and drinks, Amara prompted. That goes through Veronica. She handles distribution at the end of each month. Seniority-based shares. He gave her a measuring look. New people start at 5%, assuming they work out. And the higher-ups? They never catch on. Michael's face split in a smirking grin. Who do you think gets a cut? Roberts in inventory control adjusts the stock levels. Henderson in scheduling makes sure our crew stays together. Even Bennett in regional management gets his taste. That's Veronica's connection. She knew him from way back. Amara felt a cold fury building inside her as Michael continued to detail their operation. This wasn't just a few rogue flight attendants skimming from the company. This was organized with tentacles reaching into multiple departments. But our most sophisticated trick, Michael leaned closer, clearly proud. The digital manipulation. Veronica's son is a computer whiz. He created this algorithm that flags certain passenger profiles for special handling on our crew tablets. Profiles? Amara asked. Yeah, it analyzes booking patterns, expense account markers, even identifies frequent flyers who routinely accept upgrades without questioning charges. The system literally tells us who to target. That's impressive, Amara managed, horrified at the technical sophistication. This wasn't just theft. It was a technologically enhanced targeting system. We've been running this for almost 7 years, Michael boasted. Started small, but now we clear about $8,000 to $12,000 per transatlantic round-trip split between crew and management. Do the math. That's serious supplemental income. Assuming 8 routes with similar schemes, Amara calculated quickly, they could be stealing upwards of $3 million annually. No wonder certain routes were showing profitability issues despite full bookings. Sounds like you've thought of everything she said, keeping the edge out of her voice. We have, Michael said, his tone suddenly hardening, which is why anyone who threatens the system doesn't last long. Understand? The threat was unmistakable. Perfectly, Amara replied. Good, Michael said, patting her shoulder with patronizing familiarity. Stick with us. Learn the ropes, keep your mouth shut, and you'll do just fine. Step out of line. He let the sentence hang unfinished. As he walked away, Amara realized her phone had captured every word of his detailed confession. She now had direct evidence of not just the theft, but the broader conspiracy, including names of accomplices throughout the company. The operation was even more extensive than she'd feared. But with that knowledge came danger. Michael's thinly veiled threat made it clear that they dealt harshly with anyone who jeopardized their scheme. She would need to tread very carefully for the remainder of the flight. The sunrise painted the horizon in brilliant oranges and pinks as Flight SL-107 began its initial descent toward London. Amara had just finished helping prepare the cabin for landing when Veronica summoned her to the first-class galley. "Alicia, we have a situation," Veronica said, her voice carrying the practiced concern of someone accustomed to managing customer issues. "Mrs. Hoffman in 3D can't find her wallet. She last had it when you served her coffee." Amara immediately recognized the trap. Mrs. Hoffman, a well-dressed woman in her 60s who had been overly familiar with Veronica throughout the flight, was clearly part of the setup. "I haven't been in first class except to grab supplies," Amara replied calmly. "I didn't serve anyone there." Veronica's smile tightened. "Well, she specifically remembers you reaching across her to adjust her tray table, and now her wallet is missing." Before Amara could respond, Mrs. Hoffman herself appeared, her face a mask of distress that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, it's just terrible," she exclaimed loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "My wallet had over $200 in it plus all my cards." Other first-class passengers were beginning to take notice of the commotion. Exactly as intended, Amara realized. They were creating a public spectacle to maximize her humiliation and establish a narrative. Mrs. Hoffman Veronica said solicitously, "I'm so sorry this happened. As I mentioned, we take these matters very seriously. Company policy requires that we search the belongings of any crew member implicated in a theft. It was a masterful setup. If Amara refused, she would appear guilty. If she agreed, they would likely plant evidence in her belongings. Either way, she would be compromised." "Of course," Amara said, maintaining her composure. "I have nothing to hide, but perhaps before we get to that step, we should check the most obvious places first." "We've already looked under her seat," Veronica replied dismissively. "I'll need you to come with me to the crew area for the search." This was getting dangerous. Being isolated in the crew area would make it easy for them to plant something in her belongings. "I understand," Amara said, thinking quickly. "Before we do that, though, let's be thorough. Mrs. Hoffman, did you use the lavatory recently? What does that have to do with anything?" Veronica snapped. "I'm just trying to establish a timeline," Amara explained calmly. "It might help us locate the wallet." "Well, yes, about 20 minutes ago," Mrs. Hoffman admitted reluctantly. "And did you take your purse with you? I don't recall." "Let me check for you," Amara said, moving toward the first-class lavatory before Veronica could stop her. Inside, she quickly scanned the small space. Nothing on the visible surfaces. She checked behind the toilet. Nothing. Under the sink. Nothing. Amara felt a moment of panic. What if they hadn't planted the wallet yet? What if they were planning to find it in her bag during the search? Then she noticed something. The lavatory's waste bin had a small gap between it and the wall. Crouching down, she peered into the crack, and there it was. A sleek designer wallet deliberately wedged into the gap where casual cleaning wouldn't find it. With gloved hands, she always wore serving gloves. A habit that now served her well, she carefully extracted the wallet. Opening it revealed exactly what she expected. Mrs. Hoffman's ID and credit cards, along with the mentioned $200. Amara emerged from the lavatory wallet held aloft. "Is this it, Mrs. Hoffman?" It was wedged between the waste bin and wall in the lavatory. The entire first-class cabin had gone silent. Mrs. Hoffman's face registered genuine shock. Clearly, this wasn't how the scenario was supposed to play out. She recovered quickly, however. "Oh, yes, that's it. How silly of me. I must have—" She trailed off, unable to construct a plausible explanation. Veronica's expression had frozen into a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, that's a relief. Thank you for your thoroughness, Alicia." The watching passengers lost interest, returning to their own preparations for landing. Mrs. Hoffman retreated to her seat, visibly flustered. As Amara handed the wallet to Mrs. Hoffman, she made sure to do so in full view of other passengers. "Here you are, ma'am. All your cards and cash appear to be intact." Veronica pulled Amara aside, her fingers digging painfully into Amara's arm. "That was quite the performance," she hissed, voice low. "But don't think this is over." "I was just doing my job," Amara replied innocently. "Finding lost items is part of our customer service, isn't it?" Veronica's eyes narrowed to slits. "You know, Alicia, accidents happen on planes all the time. Coffee spills, carts roll over feet, emergency equipment malfunctions. It would be a shame if your probationary period ended due to performance issues." The threat was unmistakable. Amara maintained her calm exterior, but inside alarm bells were ringing. The failed setup had escalated the danger. Veronica now saw her not just as a potential recruit, but as a potential threat that needed to be eliminated. Back in the aft galley, Diana cornered her eyes wide with concern. "What happened up front? I saw Veronica call you over. Mrs. Hoffman lost her wallet," Amara replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Fortunately, I found it in the lavatory." Diana's face paled. "They tried to set you up already. That's not a good sign. They usually wait longer to test new people." "Test?" Diana glanced around nervously before whispering, "Veronica must suspect something. She only pulls the wallet trick when she thinks someone might be a problem." She grabbed Amara's arm urgently. "Be careful." The last 3 people who crossed them didn't just lose their jobs. They were blacklisted across the industry. No airline would touch them. "What happened to them exactly?" Amara asked. Diana's voice dropped even lower. Andrea Mitchell was the first, filed a complaint about inventory discrepancies. A week later, cash went missing from the duty-free sales. Her employee ID was linked to the register even though she wasn't working that day. And the others, Carlos Jimenez, questioned why we were charging for amenities that should be complimentary. Suddenly his schedule changed. All red-eyes, short layovers, impossible connections. He quit after 3 months of exhaustion. Diana hesitated before continuing. The worst was Sophia Chen. She had evidence, photos of Michael's duffel bag, recordings of conversations. She was going to report everything to corporate. The day before her meeting, she spilled hot coffee on a passenger. At least that's what the report said. The passenger was a friend of Veronica's. Sophia was fired for creating an unsafe cabin environment. The warning was genuine, the fear in Diana's eyes real. These people had been systematically destroying careers to protect their criminal enterprise. As the aircraft began its final approach, Amara fastened herself into the jump seat, mind racing. She had gathered substantial evidence, audio recordings, photos, witness statements. But Veronica and her accomplices were clearly suspicious of her now. The failed setup attempt would only make them more determined to eliminate the perceived threat. She had planned to maintain her cover for the return flight, gathering additional evidence. But the rising tension suggested she might not have that luxury. If Veronica decided she was a liability, they would try again, and the next attempt might be more difficult to counter. With less than 60 minutes until landing, Amara had to make a critical decision: continue the mission under increasingly dangerous circumstances, or end it now with the evidence already collected. The stakes were escalating with every passing minute. What had begun as an investigation into customer service issues had uncovered a criminal conspiracy reaching into the management ranks of Skyline Airways. And now Amara found herself in the crosshairs of people who had proven their willingness to destroy anyone who threatened their operation. The aircraft's wheels touched down on London's tarmac with a screech of rubber, jolting Amara back to the immediate present. For now, she would maintain her cover, but her instincts told her that the most dangerous part of her mission was yet to come. The return flight from London to New York began smoothly. Boarding was efficient. The aircraft departed on time, and the initial meal service proceeded without incident. But Amara could feel the undercurrent of tension. Veronica watched her constantly. Michael created reasons to check her work, and even Diana seemed more distant, as if afraid to be seen associating too closely with her. They were 4 hours into the flight, with exactly 5 hours remaining before they would reach JFK when everything changed. The first indication was a soft chime, a passenger call button from row 16. Amara, working the mid-cabin section, responded. A woman in 16C looked up with alarm. "My husband," she said, gesturing to the man beside her. "He doesn't feel right." Edward Harmon, a 58-year-old business executive according to the manifest, sat rigidly in his seat. His face was ashen, beaded with sweat, and his breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. His left hand clutched at his chest, fingers digging into his shirt. Sir Amara addressed him directly. "Can you describe what you're feeling?" His response was strained, each word clearly requiring effort. "Chest. Tight. Can't. Breathe well. Left arm. Numb." Amara recognized the classic symptoms of a cardiac event immediately. Her advanced medical training kicked in. "I need to get you some help," she told him calmly, then turned to his wife. "Mrs. Harmon, when did this start?" "About 10 minutes ago, Sophia." Harmon replied, her voice tight with fear. "He said it felt like indigestion at first, but it's getting worse." Amara pressed the crew call button summoning assistance. Diana arrived first. "Possible cardiac event," Amara told her quietly. "Get Veronica and the emergency medical kit. We need the oxygen and AED." Diana nodded and hurried forward. Within moments, Veronica appeared, Michael trailing behind her. "What's happening?" Veronica demanded, her eyes narrowing as she took in the situation. "Mr. Harmon is experiencing chest pain, shortness of breath, and left arm numbness," Amara reported efficiently. "His pulse is rapid and irregular. He needs supplemental oxygen immediately and possibly the AED." Veronica's response was unexpected. Instead of springing into action, she hesitated. "Let's not overreact," she said, her voice professionally modulated but with an undercurrent of reluctance. "Sir, have you taken any medication for this? Do you have a history of heart problems?" Edward Harmon couldn't answer. His breathing had become more labored, his face now taking on a bluish tinge around the lips. His wife answered for him. "He takes medication for high blood pressure, but nothing else." "Please, he needs help." "I'll get him some aspirin and water," Veronica said. "Michael, bring the portable oxygen canister from the forward kit." 4 minutes, Amara said loudly, checking her watch. "That's how long the brain can go without proper oxygenation before permanent damage occurs. His nail beds are turning blue. He needs the E-tank from the emergency medical kit, not the portable canister. The portable only delivers 2 liters per minute. Based on his symptoms, he needs at least 10 liters. Several passengers were now watching the scene unfold, concern evident on their faces. One had already pulled out a phone and appeared to be recording. The look Veronica shot Amara could have frozen fire. "That's not your call to make, Torres. The E-tank requires extensive documentation and triggers an automatic audit. The portable canister is sufficient." In that moment, Amara understood with crystal clarity. Veronica wasn't concerned about the passengers' welfare. She was worried about the audit that would follow the use of the emergency equipment, an audit that might uncover discrepancies in their carefully manipulated inventory. She was willing to risk a man's life to protect her theft operation. "His nail beds are turning blue." Amara pointed out, her voice deliberately loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "He's in respiratory distress. He needs the E-tank now." 3 minutes until potential brain damage, Amara announced, looking directly at the passenger who was recording. "This man needs high-flow oxygen immediately." Passengers were now openly watching the confrontation. Several had their phones out recording the incident. A murmur of concern rippled through the cabin. "I'll handle this," Veronica hissed, her eyes darting to the recording phones. "You're overstepping, Torres." "When a life is at stake, there is no overstepping," Amara replied firmly. She turned to Diana. "Get the emergency kit now. Code is 2580. It was a direct challenge to Veronica's authority delivered in front of witnesses. The lead attendant's face flushed with anger, but she was trapped by the public nature of the situation. "Fine," she snapped. "Michael, get the emergency kit." But Michael hesitated, looking to Veronica for some cue Amara couldn't decipher. Now Amara commanded, her voice taking on the unmistakable tone of executive authority she had suppressed for days. "The emergency kit is in the forward cabin left storage compartment, code 2580. Michael, startled by her tone, moved to comply. Amara turned back to Edward Harmon. "Sir, we're getting you oxygen right away. Just try to take slow, shallow breaths. Help is coming." To his wife, she added, "Mrs. Harmon, I'm going to need to move him to the floor where we have more space to work if necessary." "Is that all right?" Sophia nodded tearfully. "Do whatever you need to." With the help of a nearby passenger, Amara carefully moved Edward to the floor of the aisle. She loosened his collar and tie, checked his pulse again weaker now, and monitored his breathing increasingly labored. 2 minutes, she called out. "Where is that oxygen?" Michael returned with the emergency medical kit, which Amara opened immediately. She extracted the E-tank, connected the regulator with practiced efficiency, and placed the mask over Edward's face. Oxygen flowing at 12 liters per minute, she announced, partly for the benefit of the recording passengers. "Sir, this should help you breathe more easily. Try to relax." Within moments, the blue tinge began to recede from Edward's lips, and his desperate gasping eased slightly. Amara then retrieved the automated external defibrillator AED from the kit, placing it nearby as a precaution. She took his blood pressure, finding it dangerously elevated. "We need to divert to the nearest airport," she said, looking up at Veronica. "He needs emergency medical attention as soon as possible." Veronica's face was a mask of cold fury. "I'll inform the captain," she said stiffly, then turned to the gathering crowd of concerned passengers. "Everyone, please return to your seats. We have the situation under control." But it was clear to everyone watching that Amara, not Veronica, had taken control of the medical emergency. The power dynamic had visibly shifted. As Veronica disappeared toward the cockpit, Diana knelt beside Amara. "That was," she whispered, eyes wide. The right thing to do, Amara finished for her, always. For the next 30 minutes, Amara monitored Edward Harmon's condition. As the captain announced, they would be diverting to Gander, Newfoundland. His color improved with the oxygen, and his pulse stabilized, though the chest pain persisted. Throughout the emergency, Veronica and Michael maintained their distance, huddled in the galley, exchanging tense whispers and shooting venomous glances toward Amara. The confrontation had exposed the fault lines in their operation, revealing to the entire cabin that something was deeply wrong with the crew dynamic. As the aircraft began its descent toward Gander, Veronica approached Amara, her voice low and threatening. "You're finished after we land. I don't know who you think you are, but nobody undermines me on my flight. Consider your aviation career over." Amara met her gaze steadily. "We both know this isn't about me challenging your authority. This is about you being willing to endanger a passenger's life to avoid scrutiny of your operation." Veronica's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine reaction Amara had seen from her. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We both know you do," Amara replied calmly. "And so will everyone else. Very soon." 1 hour until we land, Amara noted quietly. "And then we'll see who's really finished." The aircraft touched down in Gander, where paramedics were waiting to board. As they transferred Edward Harmon to a stretcher, his wife clutched Amara's hand. "You saved his life," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "That woman, she was just going to let him suffer. I heard her talking about paperwork while my husband couldn't breathe." "I was just doing my job, ma'am," Amara replied, conscious of nearby passengers listening. "The proper procedures exist for a reason." As the paramedics removed Edward from the aircraft, Amara noticed several passengers had their phones trained on her recording. Word had spread through the cabin about what had happened, how the new flight attendant had stood up to the senior crew to save a passenger's life. The aircraft would be on the ground for at least an hour while refueling and completing diversion paperwork. Veronica used the opportunity to pull Amara aside in the now empty first-class cabin. "I don't know what game you're playing," she said, voice trembling with barely controlled rage, "but you've made a fatal career mistake. I'm writing you up for insubordination, violating chain of command, and unauthorized use of emergency equipment. You'll never work for this airline or any other again." Amara regarded her calmly. "Are you done?" "Excuse me," I asked, "if you're done. Because while you're threatening me, there's something you should know." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "What you might want to check your messages when we land in New York," Amara said cryptically. "I think you'll find the situation isn't exactly what you think it is." The uncertainty in Veronica's expression was the first crack in her armor of absolute authority. For the first time, she seemed to sense that she might not be in control of the narrative. 30 minutes until takeoff, the captain announced over the intercom, "All crew, please prepare the cabin." The remainder of the flight to New York was thick with tension. Veronica and Michael isolated Amara, assigning her to the aft galley while they handled all passenger services. Diana cast worried glances her way, but kept her distance, clearly afraid of being associated with the crew pariah. As the aircraft began its final approach to JFK, Veronica delivered her parting shot. "When we land, you're to report directly to the crew office. Security will escort you. Don't bother collecting your things from the hotel. They'll be sent to your home address after inspection." Amara smiled slightly. "I don't think that will be necessary." "We'll see about that," Veronica replied coldly. "Yes," Amara agreed. "In exactly 15 minutes we'll all see." The wheels touched down at JFK with a screech of rubber, and the aircraft taxied to the gate. As the seatbelt sign dinged off, Veronica stood at the forward door, her professional smile firmly in place as passengers began to deplane. Amara remained in the aft section, watching the minutes tick down. The moment had finally arrived. As the last passenger deplaned, Veronica turned to Amara, her expression triumphant. "Security should be here any minute to escort you out," she said, straightening her perfectly pressed jacket. "Unless you'd like to save yourself the humiliation and just walk out now?" Michael stood nearby, arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Diana hovered by the galley, her expression a mixture of sympathy and fear. "I think I'll wait," Amara replied calmly. Veronica shrugged. "Suit yourself. Enjoy unemployment." Footsteps echoed down the jet bridge, and Veronica's smile widened until she saw who was boarding the aircraft. James Reynolds strode into the cabin, an imposing figure in his tailored suit flanked by Victor Ramirez and 2 uniformed Skyline security officers. Behind them came a woman in a sharp business suit whom Amara recognized as Skyline's general counsel, Elaine Winters. Veronica's smile faltered confusion, replacing her smug certainty. "Mr. Reynolds," she stammered. "This is unexpected. Is there a problem with the aircraft?" James Reynolds ignored her completely. His eyes locked on Amara. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Amara nodded. "I'm fine, Dad." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Veronica's face drained of color, her eyes darting between James and Amara as understanding dawned. Michael took an involuntary step back, nearly tripping over a seat. Diana's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. "Dad," Veronica echoed weakly. Amara straightened, shedding the deferential posture she'd adopted for days. She reached up and unpinned her Alicia Torres name badge, letting it fall to the floor with a soft clatter. "My name is Amara Reynolds, Executive Vice President of Operations for Skyline Airways," she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "And you, Veronica, are the one who's finished." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient sounds of the aircraft seemed to fade away, leaving only the devastating reality settling over the cabin crew. Veronica's mouth opened and closed several times, no words emerging. Michael had gone completely pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool cabin air. Only Diana seemed to be breathing normally, her expression transforming from shock to something approaching relief. James Reynolds stepped forward, his presence filling the narrow cabin. "Veronica Bailey, Michael Dawson," he said, his deep voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "For the past 2 months, Skyline Airways has been conducting an internal investigation into allegations of theft, fraud, and passenger mistreatment on international routes." He gestured to Amara. "My daughter volunteered to go undercover to gather evidence firsthand after our traditional auditing methods failed to uncover the source of the problems." Veronica found her voice, though it emerged as a strangled protest. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. We operate exactly according to company policies. Save it." James cut her off, his tone glacial. "We have it all, Ms. Bailey. The meal scam, the amenity theft, the liquor sales. We have audio recordings, photographs, passenger statements, and inventory discrepancies stretching back 7 years. Victor Ramirez stepped forward, holding up a tablet. "We've been monitoring this flight in real time. We have footage of you attempting to frame Ms. Reynolds for theft. And most seriously, we have documentation of your willful negligence during a medical emergency that could have resulted in a passenger's death." "That's not—" "I didn't," Michael began, but his protest withered under James Reynolds's stern gaze. "Mr. Dawson, do not compound your crimes with lies. We have your conversation with my daughter, where you explicitly detailed your operation, including the names of your accomplices throughout the company." "This was all Veronica's idea," Michael blurted, desperation evident in his voice. "She organized everything, set the prices, decided who got what cut. I just followed orders." "Shut up, Michael," Veronica hissed, shooting him a venomous glare. Elaine Winters consulted her tablet. "Currently, we have evidence of theft exceeding $3.2 million, wire fraud, reckless endangerment, and conspiracy. The FBI has been notified and will be interviewing each of you separately." The magnitude of the situation seemed to finally register with Veronica. Her professional mask crumbled entirely, replaced by naked fear. "You can't do this," she said, her voice rising. "I have rights. The union has already been provided with evidence of your activities," James interrupted. "They've agreed to fully cooperate with the investigation. You'll find they're not interested in protecting employees who steal from the company and endanger passengers. This is a setup," Veronica insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. "She came here to frame us." "No," said a new voice from the jet bridge. Edward Harmon, looking pale but steady, entered the aircraft with his wife Sophia at his side. A medical professional in scrubs followed closely behind them. "This woman," Edward said, pointing to Amara, "saved my life while you—" He turned to Veronica. "Were more concerned about avoiding an inventory audit than providing me with proper medical care." Sophia stepped forward, her expression hard. "I heard you tell her not to use the emergency oxygen because it would trigger paperwork. My husband's lips were turning blue, and you were worried about documentation." Veronica took a step back, cornered by the mounting evidence and witnesses. "I was following protocol," she insisted weakly. "The portable oxygen was insufficient for his condition," interrupted the medical professional. "Dr. Gabriela Martinez, cardiologist. I've reviewed Mr. Harmon's case. Without the high-flow oxygen Ms. Reynolds administered, he could have suffered permanent cardiac damage before reaching medical care." Amara regarded Veronica calmly. "No one forced you to steal meals and sell them for cash. No one forced you to pocket premium liquor or steal amenity kits, and certainly no one forced you to withhold proper medical equipment from a passenger in distress. You have no proof." "Actually, we do," Victor interjected, turning his tablet to show her. On the screen was a collection of images: Veronica pocketing cash, Michael stashing amenities in his duffel, the confrontation during Edward Harmon's medical emergency, all captured by the aircraft's security cameras. The cameras, Michael whispered, ashen-faced. "You turned on the cabin security cameras. It was standard policy for Skyline to have security cameras throughout the cabin, though they were typically only activated in case of security threats. For this flight, however, they had been running continuously, capturing every aspect of the crew's illicit activities. Veronica Bailey, Michael Dawson, Victor announced formally. Your employment with Skyline Airways is terminated effective immediately. You will surrender your company IDs and credentials before leaving the aircraft. Security will escort you to the administrative offices where federal agents are waiting to take your statements. The security officers moved forward, positioning themselves on either side of the stunned crew members. Veronica's composure finally broke completely. You can't do this to me. I've given 15 years to this company. This job is all I have. You should have thought of that before you decided to steal from us and endanger our passengers. James replied evenly. Consider yourself fortunate that we're handling this professionally. We could have had you arrested on the jetway in front of your colleagues. As security began to escort Veronica and Michael toward the exit, Amara stepped forward. One more thing, Veronica. The former lead attendant turned her face a mask of defeat and hatred. You once told Diana that anyone who crossed you wouldn't just lose their job, they'd lose their career. Now you get to experience that firsthand. Veronica had no response. With a final venomous glare, she allowed herself to be led from the aircraft, Michael trailing behind like a deflated balloon. James turned to Diana, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation. Ms. Lopez will need to speak with you as well. Your cooperation with this investigation will be noted. Diana nodded, visibly trembling. Yes, sir. I'll tell you everything I know. We're particularly interested in hearing about Andrea Mitchell, Carlos Jimenez, and Sophia Chen, Amara added. Their experiences may help us identify other victims of retaliation. As the security team led Veronica and Michael down the jet bridge, Edward Harmon approached Amara. Thank you, he said simply, extending his hand. Not just for what you did for me, but for exposing this corruption. Who knows how many others might have been put at risk. Amara shook his hand. I'm just glad you're all right, Mr. Harmon. The doctors say I'll make a full recovery thanks to your quick action. He glanced toward the exit where Veronica had disappeared. It's disturbing to think that profit came before passenger safety. That was never Skyline's policy, James assured him. And we'll make damn sure nothing like this ever happens again. After the Harmons departed with promises to follow up, James turned to his daughter. You did good, Amara. I'm proud of you. Amara felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her as the adrenaline of the confrontation began to fade. For days, she had maintained her cover cataloging corruption while performing an unfamiliar job. The strain, both physical and emotional, was finally catching up to her. I think I need to sit down, she admitted. James guided her to a first-class seat. It's over now. You did it. We have everything we need to clean house completely. Amara looked up at her father. Not just Bailey and Dawson. This goes deeper, we know, James said grimly. Thomas Bennett's involvement has been documented. The board is meeting an emergency session as we speak. There will be a full investigation into every level of management that enabled this to continue. Amara nodded, satisfied. This had never been just about catching a few corrupt flight attendants. It was about rooting out the rot that had spread through multiple levels of the company her father had built from nothing. In exactly 24 hours, James said, checking his watch, we'll have purged every person involved in this operation from the company. But right now you need rest. We'll handle the next steps. As they prepared to leave the aircraft, Diana approached hesitantly. Ms. Reynolds, I want you to know I never took any money from their schemes. I was too afraid to report them, but I didn't participate. Amara studied her thoughtfully. Fear is a powerful silencer, Diana, but it's not your silence I'll remember. It's that when the moment of crisis came with Mr. Harmon, you chose to do the right thing. Diana's eyes welled with tears. What happens to me now? That Amara said with a small smile. Depends on what you want to happen. Skyline needs people who understand the difference between loyalty to colleagues and loyalty to values. For the first time that day, Diana's expression held something beyond fear, a glimmer of hope. As reality of what she'd accomplished began to sink in, Amara allowed herself a small smile. She had gone undercover seeking evidence of customer service issues. She had uncovered a criminal conspiracy, and in doing so, she may have saved not only Edward Harmon's life, but the future of Skyline Airways itself. 1 year after the corruption scandal broke, Skyline Airways hosted an industry conference on ethical business practices and safety culture. CEOs, safety directors, and regulatory officials from across the aviation sector filled the company's newly renovated training center, eager to hear about the changes that had transformed Skyline from a cautionary tale into a model of corporate reform. Amara stood at the podium, surveying the audience with quiet confidence. Among the attendees, she spotted familiar faces. Edward and Sophia Harmon, now vocal advocates for patient safety and corporate accountability. Diana Lopez, whose name had become synonymous with ethical leadership. And of course, her father James, whose unwavering support had made the transformation possible. A year ago, Amara began Skyline Airways faced a crisis that threatened not just our reputation, but our very existence. The discovery of long-term corruption within our ranks forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about our organization, how we operated, how we communicated, and most importantly, how we led. She paused, making eye contact with various attendees. Today, I'm not here to present a success story. I'm here to share an ongoing journey, one that has fundamentally changed how we understand our responsibility as an airline and as corporate citizens. Over the next hour, Amara outlined the comprehensive reforms implemented at Skyline over the preceding year. The Diana program had expanded from its original focus on reporting and compliance to encompass 5 integrated initiatives. First, the Walk a Mile Executive Immersion Program, which had now cycled every senior leader through frontline roles, creating a leadership team with first-hand understanding of operational realities. Second, a restructured compensation system that rewarded ethical decision-making and proactive safety improvements, rather than just financial metrics. Third, an anonymous reporting platform with robust whistleblower protections that had processed over 200 legitimate safety and ethics concerns in its first year. Fourth, a completely overhauled inventory control system with blockchain verification and random audits that had virtually eliminated theft while reducing administrative burden. And fifth, perhaps most transformatively, a cultural emphasis on courageous communication, training and supporting employees at all levels to speak up when they observed problems regardless of hierarchy. The results have exceeded our expectations, Amara reported, displaying a series of metrics on the screen behind her. Customer satisfaction ratings have increased by 27%. Employee retention has improved by 32%. Safety incident reports are up 64%. Which might sound negative until you realize it means potential issues are being identified before they become actual problems. She clicked to the next slide showing Skyline's financial performance, and for those concerned about the bottom line, our profitability has increased by 8% year over year. It turns out that ethical business isn't just the right thing to do, it's also good business. The auditorium at Skyline's training center buzzed with excitement as the newest class of flight attendants prepared for their graduation ceremony. 70 young men and women in crisp new uniforms sat in the front rows, their faces reflecting a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. Behind them, family members, company executives, and current crew members filled the remaining seats. At the center of the stage, a podium bore the Skyline Airways logo, redesigned the previous year to incorporate a subtle infinity symbol representing the company's commitment to continuous improvement and ethical operation. James Reynolds approached the microphone, his commanding presence immediately quieting the room. Today marks an important milestone not just for our 70 graduates, but for Skyline Airways itself. This is the first class to complete our entirely reimagined training program. one that emphasizes not just service excellence and safety protocols, but ethical decision-making and courageous communication. He surveyed the graduates with evident pride. You are joining a company that has been transformed. 2 years ago, we faced a crisis that forced us to re-examine every aspect of our operation and culture. That painful process taught us lessons we will never forget, and ignited changes that continue to this day. James gestured toward the side of the stage. And no one embodies that transformation more fully than our Executive Vice President of Operations and incoming CEO, my daughter, Amara Reynolds. The audience erupted in applause as Amara took the stage. At 34, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that commanded respect without demanding it. Her journey from executive to undercover flight attendant to transformational leader had given her a presence that couldn't be taught in business school. "Thank you, Dad," she began warmly, "and thank you all for being part of this special day." She turned her attention to the graduates. "The pins you will receive today represent more than just completion of training. They symbolize your entry into a community dedicated to the highest standards of service, safety, and integrity. We expect much from you, not just adherence to procedures, but active participation in making Skyline better every day." Amara paused, making eye contact with various graduates. "Some of you may know that 2 years ago I spent time as a flight attendant myself, working alongside our crew on international routes. I did this because I believed that to truly understand our operation, I needed to experience it firsthand." She smiled slightly. "I learned many lessons during that time, not the least of which was how physically and emotionally demanding your job can be. I gained a profound respect for the professionals who make air travel possible, who transform an inherently stressful experience into one of comfort and care." Her expression grew more serious. "But the most important lesson I learned was about the power of perspective. When we see the world only from our own limited viewpoint, we miss crucial truths. True leadership requires the courage to step outside our comfort zones, to listen to voices we might otherwise never hear, and to value insights from every level of the organization." As she continued her address, Amara noticed Diana Lopez in the audience seated beside Edward and Sophia Harmon. Diana, now Director of Ethics and Compliance, had become a rising star at Skyline. Her natural empathy and frontline experience making her uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between corporate policies and operational realities. Next to Diana sat a young woman Amara didn't recognize immediately. Then she realized it was the daughter of Veronica Bailey. Amara had learned recently that following Veronica's accident, Diana had reached out to her daughter offering support during a difficult time. It was a small gesture, but one that epitomized the culture they had worked so hard to build. One where accountability existed alongside compassion, where justice was tempered with humanity. Amara's thoughts returned to the ceremony as James joined her at the podium for a special announcement. Before we present the graduates with their wings, he said, "I have an announcement that has been in preparation for some time. Effective. Next month I will be transitioning to the role of chairman of the board, and Amara will assume the position of chief executive officer of Skyline Airways." The news was met with sustained applause, though it wasn't entirely unexpected. James had been gradually shifting responsibilities to Amara over the past year, preparing both her and the organization for this transition. Under Amara's leadership, James continued. Skyline has already transformed its culture, improved its performance, and established new standards for the industry. I have every confidence that as CEO, she will lead this company to even greater heights. As James embraced his daughter, Amara felt the weight of the moment. Not just the professional achievement of reaching the pinnacle position, but the profound responsibility that came with it. Skyline Airways employed thousands, served millions, and now stood as a model for ethical business practices across industries. The ceremony concluded with the traditional presentation of wings to the new flight attendants. Amara and James personally pinned each graduate offering individual words of encouragement and welcome. The last graduate in line was a young woman whose name tag read Gabriela Lopez, Diana's younger sister following in her footsteps, but in a very different Skyline than the one Diana had joined 3 years earlier. "Congratulations, Gabriela," Amara said warmly as she pinned the wings. "Your sister has set quite an example." "She has?" Gabriela agreed with a proud smile. "She's the reason I wanted to join Skyline. She says it's a place where doing the right thing matters. That's the highest compliment we could receive," Amara replied sincerely. After the ceremony, as guests mingled during the reception, Amara found herself beside a large window overlooking the airfield. A Skyline Airways Boeing 787 was pushing back from the gate, beginning its journey to some distant destination, carrying hundreds of passengers who placed their trust in the company's commitment to safety and service. Diana joined her at the window. "Penny for your thoughts." Amara smiled. "I was just thinking about trust. How hard it is to earn, how easy to lose, and how precious when it's genuine." Diana nodded in understanding. 2 years ago, I didn't trust anyone at this company. Now I can't imagine working anywhere else. The Diana program has become a case study at Harvard Business School. You know, Amara informed her. They're teaching it as a model for ethical corporate transformation. Diana laughed softly. "Still feels strange to have my name on something that important." "It's entirely appropriate," Amara insisted. "You represent everything we aspire to be as an organization. Courageous, principled, compassionate." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the aircraft taxi toward the runway. So Diana said finally, "CEO." "How does it feel?" Amara considered the question. "Humbling," she answered honestly, "and a bit intimidating. But mostly it feels like an opportunity to ensure that what we've built together becomes permanent. Not just policies and programs, but a genuine culture of integrity that outlasts any individual leader." "If anyone can do that, it's you," Diana said with conviction. As they turned to rejoin the reception, Amara caught sight of her father deep in conversation with Edward Harmon. The two men had formed an unlikely friendship, the business titan and the cardiac patient, united by their shared commitment to creating meaningful change in their respective fields. James noticed her watching and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Not just recognition, but a passing of the torch. His expression conveyed absolute confidence in her readiness to lead. In that moment, Amara felt the full circle of her journey. From the privileged daughter determined to prove herself to the undercover attendant discovering harsh truths to the transformational leader ready to guide Skyline into its next chapter. The path had not been easy or straightforward. It had required courage to face uncomfortable realities, wisdom to address root causes rather than symptoms, and patience to build something lasting rather than settling for quick fixes. But the result was a company transformed. Not perfect, but committed to continuous improvement. Not flawless, but honest about its flaws, and determined to address them openly. As Amara moved through the reception greeting graduates and their families, she carried with her the most important lesson of her journey, that true service isn't defined by who you serve, but by how you serve them. With integrity, respect, and an unwavering commitment to doing what's right, even when no one is watching. It was a lesson she would carry into her new role as CEO, into every decision, every policy, every interaction. And in doing so, she would ensure that the transformation born from crisis would endure as Skyline's lasting legacy. What an incredible journey we've witnessed today. A story of courage, integrity, and transformation that reminds us all of the power of doing what's right even when it's difficult. If you found Amara's story as inspiring as we did, please take a moment to like this video and hit that subscribe button to support more powerful content like this. The fight against corruption happens every day in workplaces around the world, and by sharing these stories, we can all make a difference. Remember, sometimes the most important changes begin when one person decides to stand up for what's right. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message today, and leave a comment letting us know what you thought about Amara's incredible undercover mission. Until next time, remember that integrity isn't just a word. It's a choice we make every single day.